But I'm delighted to welcome you today to our conversation with author Dr. Sylvie Heyman. Sylvie is in Florida, and she is the author of Beyond the Holocaust, An Immigrant's Search for Identity. You're going to hear me say a few things to start with. My name is Deborah Brunner. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Together Plan charity. My other co-founder is based in Minsk in Belarus. The Together Plan, just introduced you to where you are. The Together Plan works in the former Soviet Union with a current focus in Belarus. And our mission as a non-profit, as a charity, is to help not only Jewish people still living in the region learn how to rebuild their communities, but also to reconnect those in the diaspora to their ancestry and the homes they left behind. And we also involve non-Jewish people in the work that we do in Belarus as well. You can find out more about us either by speaking to me afterwards or on our website. So here we have Sylvie, and with her family in 1939. But we're going to come to why we start here in a moment. How I met Sylvie is when COVID started, I decided to do some global virtual networking, and I found myself in New York, virtually, where I joined Jewish Business Networking organization, and I met Sylvie in that network. So we've never actually physically met, but we know each other quite well, I feel, and which hopefully will make everybody feel very relaxed as we go through this. So Sylvie is the author of the book, as I said, and it's an incredible story. It's a very easy book to read, and it takes us through Sylvie's journey, really, through her life and what she went through. And it really is a journey of discovering her identity. It's an exploration of her identity and what she went through. And I'm going to try and take you through some of it. I can't take you through all of it, and I highly, highly recommend that you read it. But it starts, as I say, where with an introduction to telling us about her maternal grandparents who were uprooted from Poland in 1908. And they headed for, they made an attempt to head to America, but they, to get away from the rising anti-Semitism in the Russian Empire. But en route, they stopped in Belgium, and they liked it, so that's where they stayed. Now, Sylvie's father was German. He was German to the core. And in the book, she tells us that he wore his nationality with pride until his country turned on him because he was Jewish. His mother, Sylvie's grandmother, insisted that he take a job in Belgium in the diamond business as things in Germany were getting worse. And that's where he met Sylvie's mother. His sister, his older sister, was persuaded to go to America because of the rise of anti-Semitism, where there was family. But Sylvie's grandmother was too weak to travel, and she stayed behind with her younger daughter. And sadly, they were murdered by the Nazis. Now, in 1940, this picture that we're seeing here, Sylvie was, in 1940, Sylvie was 2. And the family escaped Europe. Sylvie says in the book, and she's told me, that she doesn't like to be called a Holocaust survivor because she wasn't in any camp, but they were escapees. And they went through the most traumatic journey just to get out of Europe. Sylvie has no clear memory of that time, but she is haunted by but she has noise hypersensitivity because she's haunted by the sounds of explosions and the sounds of war that were around her. And she grew up with whispers and nervousness wherever she sensed danger. So the family had to travel from Belgium. They traveled south, and they traveled through France, when they went through Le Pen, Arachan, Marseille, and they needed to get visas to Portugal, which was a huge problem. There was an edict, something called Circular 14, that was issued by the Portuguese government that only allowed certain categories of refugees in, and Jews weren't in that category. But Aristes de Sousa Mendes, the Portuguese consul general, disregarded the policy at great risk to himself, and he issued visas to Jewish people, for which he was punished later, which is in itself a fascinating story. Then there were problems in getting exit visas out of Europe. So they're now in Portugal, but the ambassador of Brazil to France, Luis Martin de Sousa Dantas, had a Jewish wife. And so he granted visas to Jewish people to help them escape. So quite a traumatic, fraught with danger journey. And I'm going to just read a little bit from the book. My story is probably similar in some ways to that of many other immigrants. The full integration to a new society varies from person to person. For me, it was a series of personal struggles, starting with language and national identity. And as I dug deeper into the caves of my memory, not knowing what I would find, I discovered an even more painful state of being, agonizing because I had kept it repressed all those years. Once I faced my demons and let them out of the closet, I could resolve many issues I carried inside of me. This book provides an inside account of the challenges and problems that immigrants may experience and reaches out to those who work with them to keep in mind the needs of their clients beyond survival. I believe that my struggles will offer insight and empathy for those that are living similar experiences. I owe it to them to tell my story. And as you will see, as we now go into conversation with Sylvie, Sylvie's story is so relevant to now, with so many people being displaced, escaping from persecution across Europe and across the world. Her story is very relevant. So here we are, we're in Brazil. Here we go, just on to the next slide. So sorry, this is just to show you, this is Belgium here. And I just wanted to show you, as this is what we just talked about, the traveling through across down to Portugal to escape, to get on a boat to come across to Brazil. Now, in Brazil, the traveling was Sylvie's family had to stay in Brazil between 1940 and 1944, and the crossing from Portugal to Brazil was a joy for Sylvie's mother because he'd escaped, he'd got away. But it wasn't the same for her father. Sylvie's father was racked with concern. He was very, very scared because they had diplomatic visas. They didn't look like diplomats and they weren't diplomats. And he lived in fear in the crossing would be turned back. But as they arrive in Brazil, Sylvie's father starts to withdraw and he starts to have rage over minor incidents, which is a theme throughout the book. Sylvie, I'm going to now ask you. You stayed in Brazil for 4 years and then you left Brazil to get to Argentina where you had family, where your father had family. Why did you leave Brazil and how did you leave Brazil? Can you tell us that story?
Yes, of course. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this. So we left Brazil because we lived in fear. We actually were in the house most of the time. We lived in fear that somebody would come up and say, let me see your papers. Are you here legally? And oh, you're not, so we're going to send you back. And, you know, there was still a war going on. So that was the main problem, that, and there was no family. We were secluded. And my father had family in Argentina, and it occurred to him, you know what, maybe we just go on and just go to Argentina and see what we can do over there.
And tell us about that. Can you describe the how you got to Argentina? Because you didn't, it was an illegal crossing and it was a very dangerous crossing, and it's brilliantly described in the book. But if you can tell us how that happened.
Well, Deborah, you know, that is a part of my life that, you know, I didn't really want to write that book because of that part. I really didn't want to relive it, but I didn't relive it because it's so embedded and clear in my mind how it went. But yeah, we were actually had to take a rowboat in the middle of the night where we crossed the Plata River, and it was very, very silent there. We had somebody who was going to actually take us there, but suddenly I started to cough, and I felt this huge hand coming to my face, huge hand, smelly from fish and smelly. It actually made me gag, but it stopped me from coughing. And then they told us also, because of that cough, the driver of the boat was concerned that perhaps the military police, which was not far away, we could actually almost see them in the horizon there, would have heard the noise. So we were told to go down on the bottom of this. This is just a little canoe, but still we were told to go down on the bottom and stay down there so that if in case we had to pass by the military police, they wouldn't see us. So that was very scary, but we did make it across, and we still had the hurdle of going through the barbed wires in order to go from Brazil into Argentina. And that was very scary. I remember that very, very well. My father had me on his shoulders for a while, but then there came a point where the barbed wires were not so together. They were a bit more apart. Of course, these people knew where that place was. They took us there, and they were able to kind of open up those barbed wires a little bit so that my father went through it, and I went through it, and my mother. And I was in the middle of this, so that I was always had a parent on one side and a parent on the other side. And needless to say, there were some scratches and some blood, and it was, you know, not a pleasant situation at all. But we did make it across. We did make it across.
Quite a story, and it's an amazing piece of the book, and it really makes you realize, I mean, this is what people are doing today to escape from war and persecution, and which is why I found your book so relevant of today. So when you get to Argentina, your family had only planned to stay there for a few months because the plan was to get to America. Your mother's drive was to get there because her family were in New York, but your father was driven and motivated by fear and terror. And then you talk in the book about how your father becomes physically abusive, and also what's very interesting is that you can't communicate with him. Now you say that your mother insisted that you learn French and speak French. That your mother insisted that you learn French and speak French at home, and you all learn Spanish, but your parents communicate in German, and that your father doesn't learn the Spanish, he won't speak the Spanish, so your parents communicate in German. How was that? What was that like? When it was difficult, you couldn't communicate with your father because you didn't speak German, he wasn't learning any Spanish. Communication issues, how was that for you?
Well, he communicated with me in French, but he was not a linguist as my mother. My mother could speak German fluently. My father's French was not, it was really quite difficult for him to do so, but still that was a language that he spoke to me. He would refuse to speak to me in German. So he spoke to me in French. And, you know, we ended up being able to communicate, not in great detail, but we ended up to be able to communicate, not in Spanish, but, and that's how we did it. Yeah.
So I'm going to read a little bit of the book now. It says, I came to understand that what changed him, we're talking about your father here, was the fate of his mother, his sister, and the children he adored, all victims of the Holocaust while he had survived. I could internalize his feelings and feel his pain in spite of my strict upbringing, and in spite of all the beatings. I can only imagine the guilt he must have felt. In contrast, Mammy's entire close-knit family had escaped from Hitler's persecution during the war, with the exception of cousin Gil, who had survived Auschwitz, and other relatives who had similar stories as we had. Although Mammy suffered a lengthy and painful separation from her family, the end of her story is a happy one because they were reunited. Not so for Pappy. I grew up in the shadow of his grief and guilt, made 1,000 times worse by our struggle to connect. I unable to communicate with him in German, and he barely able to express himself in French or Spanish. Mammy was a shining light in his life. She delighted him and he adored her, but she couldn't lift his spirits. I thought I could. Do you want to just shed a little bit of light on that? I mean, it's a very interesting and very personal account of your family dynamics and how difficult it was with your father. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, I do remember that I felt very guilty. I felt that had I not been born, that he might have wanted to go back to Germany before we were invaded in Belgium, to be with his family, with his mother. He was the patriarch of that family when his brothers had left the country to go to different places in the world. He was the one that remained as the head of the family. And he took that responsibility very seriously. And although he never said that, I always felt that if I hadn't been born, perhaps he would have gone back to see if he could, you know, save them or at least be with them at the time that they were suffering. And I took that with me, I think, through my childhood. And I was scared. Sometimes I was scared that he was angry with me that I had come along, and because of that, you know, his family had died. I had all kinds of thoughts. Why? Because they didn't talk to me. They didn't tell me anything. First of all, you don't talk to little children about things like that. And they were very European. They would be having conversations in German, and I would be quiet and not supposed to be listening to anything like that. But I was really, you know, scared, and at the same time, I felt very, very, I want to say sorry for him, but that's not really. I felt the compassion. I felt his pain. I felt that even though he was very strict with me, I knew why, and probably I deserved some of those spankings. But I just felt that I felt that responsible for a lot of his grief and his guilt. I felt responsible for many years.
Very interesting. Now, all of that responsibility, that guilt, all of that emotion caused you issues. You talk about that you had sleepwalking issues, you had anxiety, you were also living in very poor conditions. And then your parents decided to send you to boarding school, which caused fear of separation. And you thought that you'd been bad. You talk about that in the book. And the boarding school was a Catholic boarding school, so you were now a little Jewish girl in a Catholic school. You couldn't speak Spanish. You were lonely. You had no friends, and you had a sense of abandonment and fear. And I'm just going to read a little section of the book where you say, "I had arrived at the convent as a naive 6-year-old little girl who had not lived a normal life since she was 2 years old. I left as an 8-year-old speaking a new language, practicing new customs, and learning about a new religion. And while I still faced a few demons, I was also armed with inner strength that would become the backbone of who I am today." Do you want to just tell us a bit about your time at boarding school?
Sure. And also I want to say that the boarding school, there was one room for the 3 of us. And, you know, I had all these psychological signs and symptoms that something wasn't right. And I don't even know where they got this convent from and this boarding school from. I have never asked them, how come you sent me there? But that's where I went. And I had ambivalent feelings because I was 6, I really wanted to start living my life. I wanted to play with little girls and boys. I wanted to have a good time. I mean, I knew that existed, and I hadn't done that at all, but I knew it existed. I had heard about it. I had, they told me about it in books. So I had ambivalent feelings when I went to I wanted to very much. I was very excited because they presented, oh, you're going to have lots of friends and so forth. But at the same time, I was afraid of being alone. I had never been alone before. So when I get to the school, it was, nobody was nasty to me. Nobody was mean to me, but, I was completely ignored. And, the nuns tried to put me in a curriculum that I would learn the things that my father said, teach her this, but not that. In other words, don't have to teach catechism and the religious aspect of it. But I did go to school there, but the girls didn't want to have anything to do with me. And so I sort of saw them in the corridors, in the dormitory, huddled together and talking. And I was always in the periphery, and they would look at me a little bit uncomfortable, give me sort of a queasy smile and just depart from me as soon as they could. I think because they felt uncomfortable and guilty that they weren't including me. So I learned to play by myself. I cried a lot, I have to say. I did cry. I was lonesome, and things like that. But, I think that was the formative years where I played with myself, I played by myself, and I concocted, I watched a lot. I listened to what they say. I tried to learn the language. And I kind of felt like I was building some strength in me and some emotional strength. And that by the time I left, when I was 8, I really felt that I was going to be okay, that I had my best friend was me. And I got very resourceful that way.
You became resilient.
Yes, I became resilient.
I'm going to just share the screen again and just go back to the PowerPoint just to show a few pictures of you in this was you when you were very little and you were in Brazil. This is you in Argentina with your parents from the book, a couple of pictures of Shabbat with your parents. And again here. I just wanted to show those pictures. And you say in the book that you have great fondness of Argentina. You really grew up in spite of your experience of loneliness as a little girl up between the ages of 6 and 8 in the convent. You learned the language, you embraced the food and the culture, and I know that from the book you felt very Argentinian. You really sort of embraced that culture. It was the formative time of your life. And then you moved to America because your mother's family were in the States, and you wanted to. She wanted to get there. The aim was to get to America. So I'm going to read another bit of the book. Mammy and I received our visas in a few months because we were Belgian born. Pepe, on the other hand, whose birthplace was Germany, did not receive his visa until much later. From watching American films, I had always thought that I would want to live in America. But when that dream became a reality, I wasn't so sure anymore. Maybe it would be fun to visit there, but I didn't relish the thought of moving away for good. And then he goes on to say, shedding my Argentinian identity wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. And searching for my new identity took a detour and lasted much longer than I ever expected. Little did I anticipate how difficult to transition it would be. Now, I think that's, you're now 14 years old, and just tell us a little bit about that time. You're 14 and it's not quite the dream. Tell us about it.
Well, like I said before, I was ambivalent about it. I was very much looking forward to going to America. And my mom kept talking to me about the family and all the cousins that I would have, and having no siblings, I kind of looked forward to that. But when I got there, I just really, my mother was, of course, surrounded by her family, and everybody hovered over her and me as well. And it was overstimulating. It was overwhelming for me. And it didn't bring me any feelings of family. I mean, I didn't know these people. Yes, my mom told me about them, but there were so many new people that I had to learn that they were actually aunts and uncles. And so I really didn't take on so quickly as I thought. And I was surprised about that, because I really thought that hey, didn't I do well when I went from Brazil to Argentina? Didn't I assimilate well, and didn't I learn the language well? Of course, it's going to happen again. Now I'm going to America, but I was not the same age. So I'm now a teenager, and teenagers' needs are very different from a child's needs or an adult's needs. We're in that part, segment of our lives where we have a lot of questions about a lot of things, about our bodies, about our feelings, about our hormones, about the opposite sex or the same sex, whatever. But we have a lot of things going on as adolescents. And to have all that in a situation where my mom was totally, completely moved over there, and she hardly even looked at me. She didn't mean it. She was just so happy to be with her sisters and brothers. She didn't mean it, but I was left alone. My father wasn't there. I had no brothers and sisters. They couldn't make friends. I go to high school. I can't communicate with anybody. So I'm begging people to teach me some dirty language, some dirty words, so that I can be part of them. And it was a struggle that I had not counted on. But so what did I do? I did exactly what I did when I was in a convent. I just went into my what I learned. I learned English. In the convent, I was learning Spanish and other things. And here now I was learning English, and I really applied myself and tried as much as possible to learn the language so that I could overcome and get friends, and which did not happen until, actually, it didn't happen for the 4 years that I was there. I really did not have close friends that I could really confide in, because I didn't even know how to confide. I didn't know what language to use. So it was very difficult.
Just the language piece in the book is really fascinating, because we talked about the German that your dad spoke and you didn't, and all of the sort of the barriers for that. And in the book, there's a section where it talks about how my mother arrives in New York, and there's all these family that you didn't really know, and it was a bit awkward for you, and they're using the Flemish language to speak to each other, which is now another language, and that made you feel quite left out and lonely. And you say that some relatives spoke some French, so they could communicate with you a little bit, but again, you felt like an outsider. You told me something very interesting when we were talking about this talk, that your parents would use Flemish when they really want you to know. Tell us about that. I thought that was really interesting.
So dinner table for me as I was growing up as a child was, you keep quiet. You just eat. You don't listen to what they're talking. They don't talk to me. They're talking to each other in German. So of course, I mean, I was not taught that. So, but I think my parents started to notice that once in a while when they would say something, like when they would say something, I remember one time they would say something about, a gift that they were going to get me, and I lit up. I went like this, so they thought, my God, did she understand that? And I said, oh no, I must have said something like, no, I was thinking about something, and that made me laugh, and I got away with that one. But they kind of frowned a little bit and thought, does she understand? Verstehen? So when when both of them really wanted me not to know something, they would say it in Flemish. And boy, because I was actually, eating along very quietly, listening to everything they said, and pretty much catching on. And all of a sudden, they were saying things, and I had no idea what they were saying. And I thought, what happened here? But I realized that they were now speaking Flemish to really make sure that I didn't hear it. And they talked a lot about the war. They talked a lot about what was going on. They talked constantly about who had been saved, and they didn't want me to know that. but I sensed what was going on without having to hear the words.
Very, very interesting. I mean, I think the language piece and the identity piece is really, really important, and it's such a running theme throughout the book. So carrying on, in time, so just to recap, you arrive in America, you speak Spanish, you speak French, you don't speak English. So of course that's really difficult for you because you have to go to school, and that people, again, you feel alienated until you master the language. And I know that you also struggled with sayings. You've sort of using colloquialisms, which you can mention a little bit about. But in the book, you say in time your father came to America and he did learn some English. And then you were able to sort of properly converse because you both mastered the English language. And your search for national identity persisted as you opened the possibility, something that you denied earlier in the book, and you can tell us about this, that you started to open the possibility that a big part of you was German. I know that you said to me the other day that you denied, you didn't want to, you pushed that away, that sort of the German element, because of the stigma of what that carried. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Well, yes, it was a stigma, but it was also how vehemently my father did not want me to learn to speak German and understand it. He didn't want that, and that put me really, as I said, in the background. So I don't know what else I can tell you. I mean, tell me again what it is that you're looking to.
So what I wanted to understand is that at the beginning of the book, and you told me the other day that you rejected any sort of element of connection to being German, but you come back to that later in your...
Okay, when I came back to that later.
Identity.
So, for years and years and years, every once in a while, and people in America would ask me, where are you from? Are you German? And I would get very upset about that, viscerally upset. No, I'm not German. And I would say, well, I was born in Belgium and I grew up in South America, but I'm not German. And I would be like that, and eventually I became aware of the fact that I am part German. My father is German, my mother is Belgian, so I have half Belgian and half German in me. And I decided to look at it in a different vein, and actually went to the German embassy to get information on how I could become a citizen, just to prove to myself that I accepted the German aspect of me. And I have a lot of German, I wouldn't say qualities, but ways about me, how precisely how orderly we are, and other, we have just characteristics. I can't think of it right now, but just characteristics of German that really is a reason why I felt that I couldn't deny it any further.
Can you just, this is something that we sort of didn't, previously talk about, but I know in the book you talk about misusing sayings, because in language, there are lots of colloquialisms in language. And I know that when you, in the book, you talk about that was a real struggle in having to sort of use language in the right way. And that was a real barrier for you. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about that?
When I came to this country, I knew a little bit of English because I had gone to a school in Buenos Aires to learn a little bit of English. So I could talk to somebody. I could say, I want to go here. How do, things like that. I could sort of make myself understood. What problem was that I couldn't understand the answers because it seemed to me that they spoke so fast that I didn't understand anything they said. And the next thing I know is if I say, excuse me, instead of speaking slower, they would speak louder, which is something that a lot of people do without realizing it. Oh, they don't understand me. So I'm going to tell it to you a little louder. Well, I'm not hard of hearing. I just don't understand the words that you're saying because you're going too fast. So So that was, the expressions are extremely important. Extremely. You get yourself into trouble when you say the wrong things or when you don't understand it. Everybody's laughing about something and you're not. So you're not part of that conversation. You're not feeling like you are even there. You feel like you're sort of non-existent. So I did get into trouble for some of the things that, and one of them was, my event with my team, my cardiac operating team. I was working in the cardiac operating room, and I was already a young adult. And we were on a break, the team, the doctors, the surgeons, the anesthesiologists, the PAs, nurses, and the chief of surgery teased me about something. He just sort of, and I said to him, "Oh, Dr. Thompson, you're chopping my bust." And, there was this dead silence in this tiny little room that we were in. And I knew I had said something wrong. I had no idea what. I looked at them and they looked at me, and it was this moment of silence and everybody looking at it. And then somebody said, "Sylvie, do you mean you," and I don't even know.
Busting my chops.
Are you busting my chops, or is that what you meant to say? And I said, "Oh, sure, yes, sure." And everybody laughed, and so did I. But I went home and I cried. I felt so stupid. And that's exactly how you feel when you cannot communicate with others and don't understand. You just feel stupid, and it's demoralizing. But looking back, it's a fun thing.
Well, I just think it's really, I think these are things that we don't appreciate. We just take them for granted, and we don't understand how people are internalizing these issues when we just laugh them off. And I think the way you write in the book, when I read the book, I just thought it's so, you write it so beautifully, and it makes you really think, we should be careful and be more empathetic towards people, and we should think about how that influences other people. I think it's very, very well put together, the way you've got that across. So let's carry on. So there are parts of the book where you talk about how you go through a very dark period, you self-harm, you go through a lot, and it's all, all of your trauma, all of your struggles with the different identities and the loneliness all comes through. But then you go through this journey of in the later part of the book to explain the sort of how you handle this, how you go on this journey to repair. And you explain the scientific studies that helped you to understand how long-term memories are linked to specific structures of the brain, the issues connected to youth and identity formation, and the issues around national identity. I know that you wanted to say something about this. There were two certain theories that you wanted to, that were of particular importance to you, and the book is so easy to read, and you don't read these theories in great detail, but they kind of make you want to reach out and read more about them. But tell us a little bit about that, because I think it's fascinating.
I really had to make sense of this. I really had to understand better how I could be happier in the country that I so much wanted to be a part of. So I, started to read. Some of them was just coincidental, that I would pick up a book or something, and then I would read, for instance, when I read Erikson's developmental stages, psychological developmental stages, I said to myself, wait, I understand that. I understand. This is I think it's the 8th stage. Oh no, the 5th stage, identity versus role confusion. And I thought, oh, so this is what's going on. Oh, okay. I'm not really so abnormal. You think that nobody else in the world is going through what you're going through, especially when you're a teen and you're into yourself. So I read that with such eagerness, and it made me feel so much better to understand why I was going through that. And then I read studies. I read also about Maslow. Maslow has a hierarchy of psychological needs, and he has done it he shows it in a pyramid form. And the very bottom of the pyramid, and this is not for foreigners, it's for people, it's for humanity, it's for human beings. Human beings go through these stages. At the very beginning, or low down, what do they need? They need to have air, they need to have food, they need to be able to sleep, they need to have, a home. They need to have what our refugees that are coming in now need. But I wasn't in that category. I had already gone through that category. So where was I in that pyramid? And I found myself in a stage that I will say, I'm not exactly sure which one, but it was a stage where, yes, where the basic survival needs were there, but I found myself in the middle of this pyramid. I found when people need to feel like they're part of a society, part of a group, part of people that they can relate to, relationships. And that's where I was stuck and wasn't really satisfied or in any way there to get the benefits of this particular time of my life. So it helped me a lot to see that studies had been done, that there were statistics on foreign young people who had mutilated themselves. So I wasn't the only one. People who had even contemplated suicide, so I wasn't the only one. And I did all that through my own studies. There was, at that time, really people weren't paying attention to foreign. Today we have, English as a second language. Maybe we have a little bit more attention. But again, it's focused mainly on everybody in general, the foreigner in general. I'm focusing on the adolescent foreigner, a very different kind of animal than a child or an adult. Very different kind. If we can think back into your own adolescence, that's not a time to be discovering you're busy discovering yourself. So that was it was very good for me, and that's what got me into studying a lot, to always doing research. That's why I'm continuing my mind. This is the way I lived my entire life, that if there's something going, let's find out how and how it pertains to you. So it made me feel a lot better.
So that was the Abraham Maslow theory of hierarchy that looks at the sort of sense of belonging and self-actualization. And if anybody doesn't know about it, I highly recommend you look it up or get the book. And then there was Erikson's developmental theory versus isolation versus despair.
Well, I think actually I looked it up again, and it's actually identity versus role confusion. Yeah, identity versus role confusion. And what's interesting about that, Deborah, is that, he takes it all the way to old age. And because of my recognizing this particular stage that I was in when I was a teen, now that I am certainly not a teen, but really into older age, I recognize yet another stage that Erikson talks about, which is a stage where you are older and where you are looking more into introspection, how you can do something for the world out there, some altruism. So it's a different mindset as you go through these stages. And the important thing about it is that as you go through these stages from birth to old age, you really need to have worked it out. You had to work that stage in order to go into the next stage in a healthy way. If you don't work that stage out properly, you're going to find conflict and problems going further down your life. So it's very important to recognize the stage that you're in and make sure that you resolve it to the best of your ability.
Yeah, fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So, so let's just have a quick think. Let's just do a little bit of a recap here. So you go from Belgium to Brazil to Argentina to America. You have different languages, French, Spanish, English. You kind of secretly master German, but try not to let your parents know that you're understanding. You're Jewish, and you value that. And maybe you can say a little bit about that. You suffer from trauma, isolation, separation, loss. It's a lot of stuff to have to deal with in a life. Just tell us a little bit about the Jewish element in your life.
I think the Jewish identity is the only one that I did not have to struggle with. I did a little bit, flirted with it a little bit when I was in the convent, and I still had no knowledge about the religion, because this was not a time to really talk about it too much. There was too much going on in the world out there. And I guess my parents were afraid that I would be asking more questions and they would have to explain the war. I don't think they wanted to do that. So, but being in the convent, and then at home, when I came home, my mom had hired a woman, a housekeeper, who became very, very dear to me, a very, very dear person. And I used to spend time with her family. You know, she was an Argentinian lady, and she had family all the way in the country. And I would go in places with her. And I remember that we went to a church, but I, didn't tell my father, just to see the church. She always told me, you're a Jewish girl, so, but I did buy a cross, and I told her to keep it for me, because I was afraid my father, would kill me if he saw me with the cross. So I did have a little bit of a conflict when I was much younger. But as I grew up, I think that I had to hang on to one thing that I didn't have to worry or didn't have to reckon whether I could identify it. And being Jewish was that one thing. There was never any doubt in my mind as I came to this country, who I was, where I came from, and I was happy. I was proud to be a Jew.
Fantastic, amazing. I'm just going to screen share again. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. So this is your American citizenship, which I think was important that we show that. That's in the book. And then just to recap, that you start life here. You escape out of Europe, going through Portugal, through France, through Portugal, come down to South America, Brazil, Argentina, up to America. So you really have covered a lot of ground in your life, and had to struggle with all these different identity crises along the way, which I think you've mastered unbelievably. Just to say that Sylvie is quite inspirational. I mean, she's an author, she's written several books. She is very educated. She has her own website, which you can look up. And I know that Sylvie, through the book that we're talking about here, Beyond the Holocaust, an Immigrant's Search for Identity, I know she has aspirations that if the book will be used, or she herself can help as a speaker, to help in schools or community spaces, to people to understand how to support refugees, immigrants, children coming in through school systems as she did, so that these people don't have to suffer as she did. I know that's something of importance to her, and one of the reasons why she wrote the book. So I just wanted to have one final reading. It's the last few words of a few lines of the book, and then we'll open it up to questions. And it says, in time, I grew to accept and respect all my nationalities that emerged at different times, like having multiple personalities, with mannerisms and hand motions adapting to the language of the moment. I no longer define myself by my accent, vocabulary, or a fleeting moment of national duality. My identity as a Jew and I found peace in my national identity. When I speak American English and salute the flag of the United States of America and sing the national anthem, I claim my national identity as an American Jew. That is who I am. I think it's a very beautiful way to end the book. I'm going to stop screen sharing and now open up, stop sharing,
You sure you want to leave? Okay.
give you the opportunity to ask Sylvie any questions that you have about any elements of what we've talked about, or if you've read the book, any element of the book. Sylvie's very open to answer your questions. Yes, Terry, unmute, and then Gillian.
Hi, Sylvie.
Hey.
Hi. Yeah, so when someone asks you, I have two questions. If someone asks you, are you German now? When they ask you that now, or where are you from? What do you say?
Well, where I'm from, most of the time when somebody says, where are you from? I usually say, well, I lived in Port Washington, and I'm trying to evade that, you know. And if they say, no, I don't mean that, I mean, where are you really from? Then I usually say, I am born in Europe and I grew up in South America and here. And the German part of it, it still will never sit comfortably, and I still cannot fully identify myself. But first of all, if you don't know the language and you speak the language, you really cannot call yourself a citizen of that country, you know. So that's good that I don't know the German. It's still not, but it still does not have the same visceral negative effect that it had on me when I was much younger and not as mature.
Okay. Thank you. And my next question was, having gone through so much trauma growing up, can you say that you're happy now?
You know what? It's a wonderful question. I'm not always happy, but I am always grateful. Always. And when I get to a point, if I go through a period where I'm not very happy, I think about, but are you grateful? And then I think about all the things that I'm grateful for, and I become happy. So yeah, it's just, I think I've always, you know, the story of Anne Frank affected me a lot. I speak about that in the book. Affected me a lot. That's when I realized, you know, I knew that the war had occurred. I knew people were dying, but when I read about her life and read her book, and it really sunk in that I was so blessed that I had made it out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you, Terry. Gillian.
Right, well, I haven't got any questions. I just want to say that it's an amazing story and very, very brave of you to have done it. And not only to have written it and be behind a screen, but actually be in the screen. That's really phenomenal. I've read the book, and I also know you a little bit from Zooms. And I feel I even know you much, much better now. And it was a fantastic gift that you've given us all, a gift that you can help us, help other people. You know, we're fortunate that we haven't gone from country, or I haven't gone from country to country, lost identity, to have struggles with languages, things that really, I'm very privileged and I just can't imagine what it's like. And you've given me the gift to really think about what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I definitely echo that. Thanks, Gillian. Anybody else like to ask Sylvia a question?
Okay.
I'd like to make a statement. I'm Almond Learner. I'm Sylvie's first cousin. Her mother was my father's sister. Und meine Muttersprache war Deutsch. Ich habe Deutsch gesprochen zu Hause. And I always say when someone asks me where I'm from Antwerp, Belgium. And Belgians are very industrious, very hardworking. And that's what I've done my whole life, which my uncle, my family has. And I'm very proud of what Sylvie has accomplished. And I know how hard it's been. And once upon a time, I was lonely. But that's life. But I'm grateful for everything that I have. I'm grateful to be in the United States. And we have a wonderful family. And that's what has been terrific for me, for Sylvie, for all of us. I once had over 20 first cousins. Sometimes when I was a kid, I couldn't remember some of their names. But I spoke German at home in Belgium, but in the United States, we gave up German. We spoke English. We are American. And we are blessed to be in the United States. Thank you very much, Sylvie. You've done a fabulous job. We love you.
Thank you, Armand.
Thank you. Lovely words. Really, really important. Thank you. And thank you for being here. Would anybody else like to speak, say anything, ask Sylvie any questions?
I would. Can you hear me?
Yes, Jane. Hello.
Hi. I want to get on my video, but I just realized I did that. Oh, here we go. Hi, Sylvie. Hi, how are you? I love you so much. I have known Sylvie on a whole different level maybe than some of you. Professionally, she was my chiropractor, my acupuncturist, my feng shui master, and my moral supporter. She was a very important person in my life, and I think she knows that. But when she was working in Long Island, and I was just amazed because she's like a wonderful onion that you peel these layers from her story. And I knew her, she started off, I'd met her as a chiropractor, and I was petrified to be touched by her. And she worked with me for a long time because I didn't like the idea of hearing my neck crack. But she got me past that and into acupuncture when she went and studied acupuncture in China. And as she said, she's a constant learner. And then once I asked her, I said, how did you get into chiropractic? And she said, well, I was working in the hospital. And Sylvia, you correct me if I'm telling the story wrong, but you said, I was working in the hospital and I felt like I could do more for people. I could help people feel better. And rather than dealing in the surgical part, I thought, well, if I was a chiropractor, I could help. Mm-hmm. And then that took her to the next phase. And then she said, yes. And then I decided, I got my chiropractic degree. And then I went to China to learn about acupuncture so I could help people even more. So it's just been a constant theme in her life. And what she said about being grateful, I think is really marvelous, because we all have days of unhappiness, and probably no one has had as much unhappiness as you and some of your family members. But the grateful piece, I think, is amazing. And she's a very important person. So thank you.
Absolutely. Jane, are you in Long Island? Is that where you are at the moment?
I live now in upstate New York in the Adirondack Mountains. We knew each other on Long Island. I am not Jewish. I have Jewish friends, and I count Sylvie among them, but I don't know much about the religion, but this is fascinating to me, and I'm very involved in a group that does some discussions. And after this, Sylvia, I want to talk to you about how we can do this. And there's a very large immigrant population here where I live now in Utica. During the Bosnian War, a lot of Bosnians came, and there are a lot of Bosnian people here. There are now also a lot of Asian immigrants that have been brought over through different traumatic events, and also people from Iraq. So, and I have friends that are very involved in that movement with immigrants in Maine. So I would really love to tap you and and also the Together plan, I think, is wonderful. And you're a great interviewer, Deborah.
Yes.
You really are. I think that selling you along with Sylvie would be great, because it helps to have someone ask good questions. That's so
my pleasure. I mean, I enjoy it, and I really, there's so much in this book that we can learn from. And Sylvie's so great. I mean, she's very open to talking about all of this. I mean, everything that she's written is just incredible in such a you know, it's not a big book. We can't see it. It's not a big book. But it's packed with very easy to receive information. I highly, highly recommend it if you haven't read it. And you know, absolutely. I mean, I'd be more than happy to, you know, help if I can, you know, in conversation so that people can access this in a tangible way. 100%. My pleasure.
Thank you. This is great.
Words. Thank you so much.
Great.
Okay.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Away. Oh, we've got two. Okay, Barbara, and then.
I just want to say hi, Sylvie. I come from an altogether a different time in Sylvie's life. And we were both nursing students in Bellevue Nursing School back in 1956. And I just would like to say that over the years, it's just been a privilege to know you and to call you a friend. And this has been a wonderful, wonderful session. And have a wonderful 2022.
Thank you, Barbara.
Love you.
Lovely, lovely. Barbara, where are you in the world?
Well, I live in a place called Georgetown, Texas, which is north of Austin, Texas. Obviously from the Bronx.
yeah, got that tinge there. Yeah, okay, great. Love it. Love that we have so many people from around the world. It's fantastic. Elaine, hello. Come in.
Hi.
Around the corner from me.
Yes, I just wanted to say, Sylvie, that I read your book and I loved it. And I'm now going to download Make It a Habit. That sounds really interesting and something I'm sure I need. And the other question is, when are you coming to England so we can meet you?
Well, whenever the travel becomes a little bit more open and comfortable and safe. I do have.
Or Elaine, we'll just nip over.
I love London. I love London. We've been there before, and I absolutely love it. And I, you know, sometimes I just say to myself, you know, and sometimes I actually sound British because I catch people's accent a lot. And sometimes if I'm in England for any length of time, I come out sounding like a British. But I love London. So I hope you come and visit soon. Yes. And Belarus. And Belarus.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, maybe we'll meet there.
You never know. Stranger things.
Thank you.
Any other questions at all?
Thank you.
So one of the things that, if you do think of anything, just wave madly. One of the reasons why, other than the fact that I just love this book, I love Sylvie, I think she's amazing and she's inspirational, and that it relates very closely to the work of the Together Plan, because we are helping communities and Jewish people to reconnect to their lost Jewish identity. Jewish people who have come through survived Holocaust, or were born beyond that time but came through the communist period, and during the communist period Jewish people couldn't be Jewish, and so there is a really big piece of work that we do to help people to reconnect to their lost identity, and it's a really, really big piece. So it's totally relevant, and that's why I sort of, when Sylvie and I met at Jewish Business Network, and she sort of talked about the book and I talked about what I do, we both leaned into the Zoom screen, and we knew we had a lot to talk about, and that's definitely the case. And actually Sylvie is doing a fundraising event. She's doing a 12-day fundraising event where she'll be walking a mile a day to raise money for our sister non-profit, which is a 501c3 in the States. Called Jewish Tapestry Project, which has literally just come to life. It's a very new non-profit. We've just registered it. It's based in California. So if anybody wants to get behind Sylvie's fundraising efforts, which start on February the 14th, then you know, she can send you the link, or we can, and you can contact us. So I just wanted to share my screen just one more time. Before I let you all go off and finish your day wherever you are, just to say this is my final screen, to say that identity really does matter. That's our contact details, london@thetogetherplan.com, or if you want to know more about the Jewish Tapestry Project, you can email office@jewishtapestryproject.com. We are one and the same. Sylvie, I just want to say a massive thank you to you. It has been an absolute pleasure to prepare this, to read the book, to get to know you more. I value your unbelievable honesty, integrity, and your drive. And am I allowed to share your age?
Oh, absolutely. I have no problems with that.
So Sylvie's going to be 84 next month. And what gal, you know, please God by me, I think you're amazing. You know, Sylvie is a valued Together plan. She's getting,
You sorted it with
and she
used it for 10 transactions a day.
just want
But
to
they pointed out it was declined on the 5th transaction.
being part of this.
Anyway.
Round of applause.
Thank you so much. Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure. And thank you everybody for coming. Really, thank you.
I just wanted to say one thing, that I was a volunteer for HIAS, and I think it's a very fine organization that helps refugees here in America. It's a huge, huge, huge organization, and you really don't feel like you're doing anything because it is so big. And I switched my alliance and my cause and all the revenues from the book that of the Beyond the Holocaust book is going to go to the Together plan. And you know, even though right now the book says the highest, I will make that change on that. But my alliance now is to help build the Together plan and the Tapestry Project plan as well.
Thank you, Sylvie. I'm just
May I sneak in one quick question?
Somebody just messaged me saying I think there's another question. You can sneak in as much as you like.
Okay, it just came to me that I'm so curious to hear, Sylvie, what you say about this. I apologize. I missed the first half hour of this talk, so I'm very sorry. And if this was addressed at the beginning, please tell me. So with identity, so many people feel like it's nature or nurture. You're born with it, or do you learn it? And when people have so many traumatic experiences, I would think that you use your intellect to push away certain things you were born with and just accept certain things that you want. So my question is, in your opinion, with all of the things you've been through, do you think identity is predominantly nature or nurture, something you're born with or something you can create and accept and learn?
Well, in my opinion, I don't think you're born with it. I think that it's your parents, your teachers, your friends, it's your experiences in the world that you form your identity. So, yeah, that's how I see it. Mm-hmm.
But can you unlearn, you know, if you're born in Germany and you don't feel like that is part of your fabric for whatever reason, is that something you can uncouple from yourself and then take on different identity that you feel more attached to?
You know, it's so individual. In the book, I talk about a particular young woman that I met, and she is Russian. And she came to this country when she was an older teenager, 19 or so. Now, this is a time when it's kind of difficult now with the accent. I mean, she learned her English. She knew no English whatsoever when she was there. She actually went out of her way to get, at that time, a teacher to teach her how to get rid of her accent. If you meet her today, she works with kids. She helps kids do those big exams that they have to do from high school to college, you know. So if you listen to her now, you would never think in a million years that this girl is Russian. She is completely American. So why? Because she made that decision. You decide in life, you know, whether, and as far as whether you want to talk badly about it or be sorry for yourself or empower yourself with having had that experience and going forward, that has to do with is your glass half empty or your glass half full. If you are an optimistic and grateful person, you just look at it from one point of view as opposed to another.
Thank you, Sylvie.
Nice to see you.
Thank you so much, everybody, really. I mean, feel free, we'll stay on for a little longer if you want.
For half an hour. We have
Just want to have a chat to Sylvie. It doesn't have to be a formal question.
But I think a whole thing, and then I gotta wait.
Possibly.
Okay, I'm just letting you know my requirement.
And Sylvie, if you want to,
do what you have to do.
Whatever. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
you have-
I'm ready to go.
Yeah, you have to mute yourself.
there we go. It's muted. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, right. She knows about it. Yeah. It was wonderful to see so many wonderful people here. And I'm really quite touched. I'm very touched.
Yeah.
And I tell you, working for the Together Plan has made a big difference in my life. Knowing that I can still help others and having faces in front of me that of people that I can help.
I think what's very important in having you on board, and it works both ways, is that we learn about each other's differences, we learn about each other's stories, and I think everybody has a story. And what we try to do here is, I mean, we have something called the Story Bank. We are always looking for people's stories because they inform us and they educate us. And, you know, we've learned so much from you, Sylvie, but likewise, you've learned a lot about the work that we're doing in part of the world where, you know, most people don't know about. And, you know, it's a really untalked about part of the world. So we really are all becoming better human beings, I think, by doing this, and you know, being able to, you know, create these sorts of events where we can all learn something from it. I mean, I'm sure everybody here has learned something from today's talk, and I know that I've learned a lot from reading your book. It's so relevant. It helps me to tell the story of what people are going through in the field that we're working in. So, you know, it's hugely valuable, the book that you've written, and I hope that, you know, if Jane can, you know, connect to you and take that to help other people, you know, who are struggling and going through what you went through, then, you know, wow, what an amazing opportunity to put your book and you to, you know, to great use and help other people who are struggling not have to go through the struggles that you went through. I think that's fantastic.
Deborah, I have another question. This one's for you, actually. The Together Plan, when I read briefly about it before I signed up, do you only, I have a dear friend who's trying to find some links in her Jewish heritage. And do you specialize just in Europe, in Russia, Belarus, that area, or is it all through anyone who's looking, or who should she contact? That's what I'm trying to find out.
So it depends where this person's from. We do help people find their ancestry records in archives in Belarus, but we can also point them to, if they're looking for anything in the Polish archives. We have a very good relationship with the historical archives in Warsaw, where there's a lot of information that can be found there. Ours is a paid service because we don't have an institute, and we have to pay archivists to go in, and there are no digital archives in Belarus, so it is literally pouring through huge, great big tomes. In Warsaw, it's a free service because they've got a lot of it is digitized, and they have people working at the Historical Institute who will do that search. So if anybody's looking for anything in those regions, then yes, we can help them.
Right. I think she's looking in Austria, but I'm not positive. So maybe the people in Warsaw could direct her to.
Possibly, but I do have contacts in Austria who I might be able to link.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That's a pleasure. Sylvie, did you say?
Yeah, what about ancestry.com? Did she try that?
Yeah, I think she's probably doing that. She found some information. Her father, who never really shared their Jewish roots with her, very much like your family. I guess when she was an adult, they finally said, you know, we are Jewish, and I escaped the Holocaust, and I had family that was left behind. And I don't know much. I'm actually talking to her today. I'll find out more, but I know she's done ancestry.com, and she's working with through some diaries that he kept. But, you know, I didn't know, you know, she may want more information. She may, but I think it's really fascinating and wonderful. And there's something too about age that makes us want to find out even more about our heritage. I think, you know, that's part of growing older, is we realize how important the history is.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. I mean, we have a lot of people who contact us, and we've found records going back to sort of 1740. I mean, Maeve, who's on the wave, Maeve, is helping us with that. She's a student, but she is one of our caseworkers, so she helps to look after people who inquire for a search. And some of the records that we find people are quite extraordinary, really quite extraordinary, and things that people have been looking for decades. I mean, we've had some people say I've been looking for that for 30 years. And it is sometimes, you know, it's very sort of looking, you have to dig deep. But the archivists that we work with are really good at what they do, and they do the digging, and they find it. So it is fascinating. Yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
No, so I'm going to allow you all to go and do the rest of your day, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. Sylvie, once again, a huge thank you for your time. And thank you everybody for coming, for your questions, for your interest. Stay in touch. We've got more talks. If you go onto our events page on the website, we've got some fascinating talks, all sorts of things happening. Stay with us, come on the journey, and keep in touch.